moment Logan heard Lucas's cold, merciless tone, a shiver shot down his spine. The words filled him with pure terror. But before he could beg for mercy again, Jordan answered loudly. "You got it, Lucas!" Jordan grabbed Logan's good left ankle, and a sharp crack echoed in the room. "My ankle!" Logan shrieked, his face crumpling in agony. The pain was a blinding, white-hot wave, but unconsciousness offered no escape. "You're too loud," Jordan said with disgust, then delivered a sharp blow to the back of Logan's neck. Logan's eyes rolled back, and he went limp, finally succumbing to unconsciousness. Jordan dragged Logan out of the house by his leg, disposing of him without a second thought. A moment later, they were gone. Only then did Lucas take his hands away from Amelia's eyes and ears and pick her up. Grace had been frozen in the doorway, completely stunned ever since Jordan had shown up and grabbed Logan's leg. She stared at the scene, feeling like she was in a daze. It was surreal, and she couldn't find the words to speak. That two-faced monster, Logan Hale, who had locked her away and tried to assault her, was just dragged off like an animal. He was completely helpless, his desperate pleas meaning nothing. And the man powerful enough to do it was related to Amelia. Amelia was perched on Lucas's arm, her own arm wrapped tightly around his neck. Seeing Grace standing stunned in the doorway, she called out happily, "Aunt Grace, see? Daddy came to get me. He beat up the bad man, and now he's gone. You don't have to be scared anymore." It finally clicked for Grace. This handsome, incredibly young man was the father Amelia had been talking about this whole time. And he was just as powerful as Amelia had said. He'd taken care of Logan for good. She was finally free from that devil's grasp. Free. Grace was so overwhelmed with excitement that tears started streaming down her face. She choked back a sob, unable to speak. Her eyes filled with gratitude as she looked at Lucas. Lucas was a little surprised when he saw Grace. The woman was young and beautiful, with a sophisticated, elegant air about her. Her long, waist-length hair gave her a classic, gentle beauty. It was no wonder a creep like Logan would want to keep her locked up here. A few minutes earlier, as he and Jordan had quietly approached the house, they'd overheard the conversation between Grace and Logan. They'd heard how much she cared for Amelia and how fiercely she protected her. "Daddy, Aunt Grace is really nice. She was playing with me, and she was even going to teach me how to bake a big cake. But then that mean guy showed up and we didn't get to bake it. If Aunt Grace hadn't protected me, that bad guy would have hurt him," Amelia said quickly to Lucas, her round cheeks puffed out. "Thank you for taking care of my daughter." Lucas thanked Grace sincerely. When he found Amelia in the little room just now, she seemed okay and wasn't too scared. Plus, there were dolls, coloring books, snacks, and other kid stuff around her, which was clearly all Grace's doing. Grace had agreed to Logan's request mostly because she was worried about Amelia. Lucas was really grateful that a stranger, someone she'd only just met, would go to such lengths for his daughter. Grace raised her hand, wiped the tears from her face, and said, a little embarrassed, "You don't have to thank me. I didn't really do anything." "I should be thanking you and Amelia. If it wasn't for you two, I might have been hurt by that man. You saved me, so you're my heroes. I'll never forget this." Grace bowed to Lucas. Lucas quickly helped her up. "It was nothing, really. Please don't do that." Lucas then pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Grace. "Here's my card. My name is Lucas Gray. If you ever run into any trouble, whatever it is, just give me a call and I'll help you out." Lucas didn't mind helping Grace, especially since she had been so kind to Amelia. Grace took the card. It just had his name and a phone number on it. Mr. Gray, I'm Grace Keller, she said. She didn't have a card with her. All right, Miss Keller, you're free to go. Logan Hale won't be able to threaten you ever again. I'm going to take Amelia home now. Goodbye, Lucas said with a smile. Then he turned to leave, holding Amelia in his arms. Goodbye, Aunt Grace. You should come play at our house sometime. Amelia squirmed in Lucas's arms and waved goodbye to Grace. With a genuine smile, the first one she'd had in a long time, Grace waved back at them. Okay, goodbye. At the door, Jordan had already taken Logan away, but he'd left a car for Lucas. Lucas drove while Amelia sat quietly in the back seat, buckled in safely. During the drive, she chattered on and on about how nice Grace was. Lucas smiled as he listened. It seemed like she wasn't too scared by what happened today. He was so thankful for that. Soon, they arrived back home. Charlotte, who had been worried sick, immediately ran outside when she heard the car pull into the driveway. She saw Lucas carry Amelia inside, sighing as he set her down. Cheyenne had been working late at the office, but was already home. When she saw Lucas and Amelia, she looked confused. Where have you two been? Why are you home so late? Lucas and Charlotte hadn't told Cheyenne that Amelia had been taken away by Scarlett Wright, or that Charlotte had been forced to go to Logan Hale's bar. They were afraid it would worry her. Now that he had brought Amelia back home safely, and nothing had happened to Charlotte, they planned to keep the dangerous situation from Cheyenne. Lucas was trying to find a random topic to talk about when Amelia leaped happily into Cheyenne's arms and exclaimed, Mommy, I played at Aunt Grace's house today. She's as pretty as a fairy. She's so nice. She played dolls with me, told me stories, and was going to teach me how to bake a huge cake. But before we got to bake the cake, a bad guy came. Mommy, let's invite Aunt Grace over next time. I like her so much. Amelia blinked her large, watery eyes and looked at Lucas. Daddy, let's go play with Aunt Grace tomorrow, okay? When Cheyenne heard Amelia say these words in her innocent, childish voice, her expression changed. She looked at Lucas with a complicated gaze, her heart full of a mix of emotions that was hard to describe. When Lucas saw the look on Cheyenne's face, he knew she had misunderstood something. But if he tried to explain, he'd have to reveal that Amelia had been kidnapped. The moment he said that, Cheyenne would be terrified and worried. She probably wouldn't be able to sleep, consumed by anxiety. So, he decided it was better not to tell her. While Lucas was struggling with what to do, Karen suddenly appeared and started yelling at him. Seriously? You good-for-nothing bum! You're lucky Cheyenne even married you. And now you have the nerve to be messing around with some woman named Grace? Lucas Gray, you are absolute scum. Since you're cheating, you should just divorce Cheyenne and get out of this house. Karen had been hoping her daughter would divorce this loser Lucas and marry some rich guy. Now that she'd heard Lucas was fooling around, she was practically pushing for them to be divorced as soon as possible. Charlotte looked at her mother, completely speechless. She knew the real story, and exactly why Lucas brought Amelia home so late. She figured Aunt Grace must have been the person Logan Hale had watching Amelia. Even though Charlotte didn't know how Grace treated Amelia, she was positive Lucas wasn't cheating on Cheyenne and had nothing to do with this woman. Seeing Karen going on, trying to drive a wedge between them, Charlotte jumped in to stop her. Mom, you have no idea what you're talking about, so just stop, okay? Then she quickly turned to Cheyenne. The Aunt Grace that Amelia mentioned is actually a friend of mine. You had to work late today, and Lucas was busy too, so he asked me to pick up Amelia. but something urgent came up for me, so I asked my friend to watch Amelia for a little bit. That's all that happened. Cheyenne, don't get the wrong idea." Without saying a word, Cheyenne glanced at Charlotte and then looked suspiciously at Lucas. Karen let out a high-pitched laugh. "Charlotte, don't cover for this loser. Since when do you have a friend named Grace? Why don't your sister and I know about her? You're still young. You don't know how scummy men can be. This bum might fool you today and take Amelia to see that shameless woman, but who knows what he'll do next." Then Karen turned and poked Amelia's head. "And you, little one, you don't know any better. She gives you some candy and plays with you, and suddenly you're singing her praises. You'll see what's what when she ends up being your stepmother." Her words made Amelia pout, and Cheyenne's expression soured. Amelia was Cheyenne's whole world, but Lucas had taken her to meet some other woman who'd won her over in just a few hours. Amelia was even singing her praises. Clearly, this woman was no amateur. If they really... The thought of what Karen suggested felt like a knife twisting in Cheyenne's heart. Staring at Lucas, she said, "You need to give me a real explanation for what happened today. Don't even think about making up some random excuse to get out of this." Lucas couldn't believe Cheyenne actually suspected him, especially after Karen had fanned the flames. He couldn't help but give a bitter smile. But he couldn't reveal the truth now, and he didn't want to make up a lame excuse either. Even though he was smart, he was at a total loss for words. Seeing him standing there, speechless, Cheyenne scoffed, scooped Amelia into her arms, and turned to leave. She walked upstairs without a single glance back. Standing off to the side, Charlotte started to panic. "Oh no, Cheyenne's furious," she urged Lucas. "You have to go explain it to her, now!" Lucas considered it and was about to head upstairs to talk to Cheyenne, but then his phone buzzed. It was a text from Jordan. He stopped and shook his head at Charlotte. "This isn't over yet," he said. "I have to go take care of something. I'll explain everything to Cheyenne when I get back." With that, Lucas turned around and left. The something he had to take care of was, of course, Logan Hale and his family. Jordan's text contained a key piece of information. Logan's older brother, Connor Hale, just had a baby, and the baby shower was today. The whole Hale family was celebrating and had sent out tons of invitations. The Hales were one of the 4 most powerful families in Orange County, right up there with the Sawyers. So, an invitation from the Hales was a big deal. All the other prominent families were scrambling for a chance to congratulate them and get on their good side. Flynn Davis had mentioned it to Lucas once before, but back then, Logan had already tried to drug Charlotte, which left Lucas furious with the entire Hale family. So, obviously, he had no intention of accepting their invitation. But now, Lucas was driving toward the private community of villas where the Hales lived. However, he wasn't going there to congratulate them. Right now, the Hale estate was lavishly decorated. A large crowd was gathered, and a long line of luxury cars was parked out front. The baby shower had started in the afternoon, but the formal banquet wasn't until the evening. Logan had always disliked his older brother, Connor Hale, who was the front-runner to take over as head of the family. He couldn't have cared less about Connor's baby shower. That's why he was still hanging out at his bar with Scarlett this afternoon, which led to the whole mess earlier. The black Jaguar pulled into the parking lot in front of the Hale estate, and Lucas and Jordan got out of the car. Looking at the lively scene in front of him, he smiled coldly. "Looks like the entire Hale family is here today," he said. "Perfect." Just as Lucas was about to step into the Hale residence, a hand shot out and blocked his way. He looked over and saw a guy, maybe 27 years old. His hair was greasy, and his face was caked with makeup that couldn't quite hide the bruises underneath. It was obvious he was drunk. Lucas knew this guy. He was the first person Lucas had run into when he first got back to Orange County. It was Seth Miller, the youngest son of the Miller family, who had a serious thing for Cheyenne. He'd even shown up at her office with flowers and a ring to propose, even after she'd flat out rejected him. He'd been relentlessly hitting on Cheyenne more than once. Lucas's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint flashing in them. He definitely didn't have a good opinion of Seth, a guy who was after his wife. But Seth had no clue how dangerous Lucas was. He just stood there and said proudly, "I was thinking someone here looked a little out of place. And look, it's Lucas Gray. This is the Hale's baby shower, not some place that any Tom, Dick, or Harry can just walk into." "Lucas Gray, you're just some guy who married into the Carter family, and they're nobodies to begin with." "Oh wait, my mistake. Even the worthless Carters kicked you out. What right do you have to be here? You're trash, and you're dirtying up the entrance to the Hale place." After his nasty rant, Seth glanced at Lucas's totally ordinary clothes and laughed out loud. "What? After the Carters kicked you out, you're so broke you can't even buy your own food? You here to beg for a meal? If you really need some help, I can hook you up. Here you go." He pulled a few crumpled bills from his pocket and threw them on the ground at Lucas's feet. "What are you waiting for? Pick 'em up. A few $100s is enough to feed you for a couple of weeks. Now pick it up and get lost. You're an eyesore." Lucas didn't even think Seth was worth talking to and just gave him a cold look. Get lost. A good dog knows not to block the path. Or are you just here to be the watchdog? "You!" Seth's face instantly turned red. He was a son of the Miller family, used to being admired and respected his whole life. And now, here was Lucas, mocking him, calling him a dog. If someone important, like one of the Hales, had insulted him, he might have taken it. But he felt that Lucas, a loser who sponged off his wife's family, had no right. On top of that, Lucas was his rival, married to the woman he wanted. Plenty of other guests were arriving for the baby shower. Hearing the argument, they couldn't help but stop and watch the drama unfold. It's only human nature, after all. Feeling all those eyes on him, Seth got even angrier, sure they were all laughing at him. Being called a dog by some guy who married into his money was a huge insult. All the humiliation from Cheyenne rejecting him over and over came rushing back. He pointed a shaky finger at Lucas and yelled, "Damn it! Who do you think you are?" "How dare you yell at me? You got a death wish? I'll have someone come over here and make you regret this." Lucas just looked at him like he was an idiot. He felt a mix of boredom and amusement. Why is it always some clueless fool throwing the same old insults at me? Lucas was already tired of it. Standing behind Lucas, Jordan was smirking, obviously excited. It seemed like every time, some fool like this would make empty threats at Lucas and get taught a hard lesson. But they never learned, always lining up for their turn. Jordan wiggled his toes, itching to get moving. When Lucas didn't say a word, Seth actually thought he'd scared him. He said smugly, "What, you scared now? If you are, get on your knees, bow low 3 times, and slap yourself while you apologize. Do that, and maybe I'll let you off. Or else," he snorted. Lucas's eyes lit up as he smiled. Or else what?
Or else I'll call my guys over here right now and make sure you're carried out of here. I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Make you wish you'd never crossed me," Seth shouted. He already had his phone out. All it would take was one call, and a bunch of his guys would be here in minutes. Even though starting a major scene at a baby shower for one of the Hales wasn't ideal, Seth figured the family wouldn't mind much if his guys just dragged Lucas a little ways off before teaching him a lesson. The Millers were on good terms with the Hales, and the two families had even started a few joint business ventures. The Hales wouldn't care about some insignificant loser like Lucas. Hearing Seth's threat, some people in the crowd frowned. It had just been a small argument, and Seth was the one who started it. But now he was demanding Lucas get on his knees and bow, or face a severe beating for the rest of his life. He was being way too aggressive and vicious. But none of them were about to step in and defend Lucas. After all, even though the Millers weren't a top-tier family and couldn't hang with the real elites of Orange County, they were still a powerful mid-tier family. No one was willing to make an enemy of the Millers over some nobody who'd married into another family. Of course, there were others who were just there for the drama, soaking up the gossip. When they heard Seth threaten to call his guys to deal with Lucas, a few of them actually started cheering him on. "Yeah, Mr. Miller, teach that punk a lesson. He needs to learn his place for messing with you. He's just a loser. Who does he think he is, showing up at a Hale family event? He totally deserves what's coming to him. Hey, punk, you better get on your knees, bow down, and slap yourself to apologize to Mr. Miller. It's way better than the alternative." Lucas and Jordan heard everything the crowd was saying. Seth, of course, puffed out his chest and stared at Lucas, arrogantly waiting for him to get on his knees and bow low. Lucas just sneered and said to Jordan, "You hear that? Get on his knees, bow low, and slap himself, or face the consequences. Go ask him which one he'd prefer." "Yes, Lucas!" Jordan immediately got what Lucas was saying. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes as he stepped forward. Seth's face went dark. He was the one who had given Lucas the two choices, so why was Lucas turning it around on him? Before Seth could even process it, Jordan closed the distance with startling speed. In a flash, he delivered a powerful kick that struck Seth on the side of his head. A heavy impact sent Seth reeling, the force of the blow stunning him as a sharp, metallic taste filled his mouth. The strike was so swift and brutal that it left the onlookers speechless, a shocking display of force that froze them in place. It all happened in a blur. The next thing anyone knew, Seth's tall, muscular body was sent stumbling backward, colliding hard with a thick tree trunk about 15 feet away. He slumped against the trunk and slid to the ground, wheezing and disoriented. The scene was absolutely terrifying. Everyone was completely stunned. The same people who had been egging Seth on to attack Lucas now felt a cold shiver run down their spines. They instantly broke out in a cold sweat. Jordan walked towards Seth, one step at a time. To Seth, he looked like the devil himself. He couldn't believe Lucas's guy actually had the nerve to hit him, an heir to the Millers. And the hit was so brutal. Seth's head swam with a dizzying pain, so intense he could hardly think. A low groan escaped him, the ache in his body making it impossible to even consider getting up. The truth was, Jordan had gone easy on him. Otherwise, that one kick would have been enough to kill him. With a smile that creeped Seth out, Jordan walked over and squatted down beside him. "Lucas wanted me to ask you to make a choice. You can either kneel, start bowing low, and slap yourself in the face, or you can have both your legs broken. Have you decided which one it's going to be? It was only then that the crowd realized the two choices were the exact same ones Seth had given Lucas just moments before. Seth's face was a mess of grime and cold sweat, and he was furious. Lucas was supposed to be the one choosing. Why was this happening to him? Seth gritted his teeth and said through the pain, "I'm a Miller. My father is the chairman of the Miller Corporation, and we have a business partnership with the Hales. If you dare to touch me, the Millers will never let you get away with it. If you know what's good for you, you'd better stop right now." Before Seth could get the words out, Jordan suddenly stood up and pinned his ankle to the ground with his foot. "Looks like you want both your legs broken, huh? Fine by me. I'll make that happen right now." Then Jordan applied pressure, a clear and silent promise of what he would do next. "No!" A raw, panicked cry tore from Seth's throat. Tears of pain and fear streamed down his face, his composure completely shattered. He didn't look like the handsome heir to a fortune anymore. Jordan pursed his lips in disgust. "Weren't you talking big just a minute ago? You gotta pick one. You have 10 seconds. Otherwise, I'm assuming you picked option 2, and I'm breaking your legs." Seth's heart started hammering in his chest. The first option was to get on his knees, bow low to Lucas, and slap himself in the face. It was way too humiliating. Seth Miller just couldn't do it. The other option was getting both his legs broken. With how strong this terrifying guy was, his legs would definitely be shattered if he stomped on them. They'd never heal right. He would have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Neither option was something Seth could accept. He thought Lucas was being vicious, but he was forgetting that he was the one who came up with both options in the first place. He didn't want to be humiliated, and he didn't want his legs broken. But the people he bullied didn't deserve that kind of treatment either. Suddenly, someone nearby tried to ease the tension. "Hey, come on, let it go. Be the bigger person. Mr. Miller's already been hurt pretty bad. Why not just let him off the hook?" "Yeah, that's right. The Millers are a powerful family. If you really push Mr. Miller and something bad happens, the Millers won't let you get away with it. What's the point?" Exactly. Mr. Miller was just talking tough. He didn't actually do anything to you, and you beat him up this bad. That's enough. Why do you have to hold such a grudge? Facing these people who were siding with Seth, Lucas kept a straight face, while Jordan spat on the ground and glared at them. He sneered. "You guys are something else. Why didn't any of you speak up and tell Seth Miller to back off when he was threatening us just now? He's the one who started all this. Are you all blind and deaf or something?" Jordan continued. "A minute ago, some of you were egging him on. Don't think I didn't see you. I remember every single one of your faces. You'd better watch your backs from now on." Jordan glanced at all of them coldly. Everyone who met his gaze felt a chill run down their spine, and they didn't dare to look him in the eye, especially the ones who had been egging him on. They wished they could disappear, taking a few steps back, afraid Jordan would come after them next. The heir to the Miller fortune had just gotten his butt kicked by this guy. If he decided to deal with them, they knew it would be bad. Seeing that they'd all shut up, Jordan turned back to Seth. "So, have you made your choice yet?" Hearing Jordan's words, Seth started shaking uncontrollably, like he'd just heard a summons from hell itself. His phone had gone flying when he got kicked, so even if he wanted to call for help, it was too late. Seth had heard the smaller families trying to stick up for him just now, but he never imagined Lucas and Jordan wouldn't buy it for a second. Suddenly, Seth was all alone and completely helpless. His heart sank with despair and fear. At that moment, Seth deeply regretted his decision to confront Lucas and force him into that corner. Too bad there are no do-overs in life. When he saw Jordan lift his foot again, ready to stomp on his leg, Seth forgot all about his pride and let out a loud shriek. He scrambled to his feet and crawled toward Lucas. Since he was already on his knees, the rest was easy. He swallowed his pride and slapped himself hard across the face, twice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gray. I'm sorry for disrespecting you. Please, let me go, for the Millers' sake." Seth's heart was filled with shame and humiliation. Kneeling in front of Lucas and slapping himself in public was the most degrading thing he had ever experienced in his entire life. Seth's apology was obviously fake, and he even had the nerve to bring up the Millers. On top of that, the two slaps were weak, and he didn't even bother bowing low. Jordan was furious. He frowned, about to demand a real apology from Seth, but Lucas suddenly cut in. "Enough. You're in this mess today, not because I put you here, but because you did this to yourself. You're reaping what you sow. And don't even think about threatening me with the Millers. I'd actually love to meet them. You have half an hour to get your father here in front of me. Otherwise, I have no problem tearing your family down." With that, Lucas turned and walked straight toward the gate of the Hale residence, with Jordan right behind him. The two of them quickly disappeared into the light. The people left outside stared at each other, so terrified by Lucas and Jordan that they were completely silent. Meanwhile, his face twisted with rage and hatred, Seth pushed himself up from the ground, shakily getting to his feet. "Lucas Gray, I'll make you pay for this." Inside the Hale family's sprawling estate, the lights were bright and the decorations were extravagant. Even for a baby shower, the place screamed opulence, showing off the immense wealth and power of one of Orange County's top families. The massive banquet hall spanned thousands of square feet, filled with dozens of large, elegant round tables, easily big enough to hold 1,000 guests. Each elegant table was laden with all sorts of gourmet food and drinks. Everyone was just waiting for the host to officially kick off the banquet. Lucas and Jordan found a seat at a less crowded table. The other guests there glanced at them with some surprise. They were new faces, people they didn't recognize. But with so many people invited to the Hales' baby shower, it wasn't surprising that a smaller family like theirs wouldn't know absolutely everyone. Someone at a nearby table suddenly asked, "Why is he here?" The person who spoke was a heavy-set woman and someone Lucas recognized. She was James Wilson's wife, Sharon Hart. They'd once gotten into a fight with Karen over a bracelet. Right now, Sharon Hart's mouth was hanging open as she pointed at Lucas, completely shocked. Everyone around them turned to see where she was pointing. "Shut up!" Wilson gripped her arm, his glare sharp as he glowered at her. "Honey, I'm just curious," Sharon said. "This is the Hales' baby shower. That Lucas is just a worthless freeloader who got kicked out by the Carters. What right does he have to be here?" Wilson stared at her with a sour expression and warned, "Sharon Hart, I've told you before to leave him alone. Are you just ignoring everything I say? If you keep running your mouth and causing trouble for me, you can get the hell out of here right now." He sounded vicious and didn't hold back at all. Sharon was humiliated and furious that her husband had chewed her out in front of everyone, but she didn't dare say a word back to him. Her family had been pretty well off when she was younger, which was the only reason she'd been able to marry Wilson in the first place. But her family's businesses had taken some major hits and weren't doing so well anymore. On top of that, her figure had changed considerably after having their child, and she was painfully aware that Wilson was no longer attracted to her. Between losing her family's backing and her often foolish behavior, she had absolutely no confidence around Wilson. Wilson didn't have the patience to deal with his embarrassing wife right now. Instead, he glanced over at Lucas. He only relaxed when he saw that Lucas wasn't looking in their direction. The truth was, Wilson and Lucas had clashed a few times before. But it wasn't until Lucas and Jordan badly injured more than 10 of his guys right after Karen and Sharon's fight at the hotel that he finally understood. He immediately tagged Lucas as a dangerous guy, someone you just don't mess with. He'd rather avoid Lucas completely than risk getting on his bad side. That was the lesson Wilson had learned. Besides Sharon and Wilson, Dominic and Bryce Carter had also seen Lucas walk into the banquet hall. The Carters were a pretty minor family in Orange County, especially after everything that happened recently, like losing the Brilliance Corporation. They also went through a financial crisis that knocked them down to being practically nobodies. In fact, they had to pull every string they had just to get an invitation to this baby shower. Their goal was to use this chance to get on the Hales' good side and make connections with other important families, something every lower status family tried to do at these kinds of events. But when Bryce saw Lucas, the Carters' former freeloader's son-in-law, casually stroll into the hall, he was instantly furious. "Grandpa, why is that piece of trash, Lucas Gray, even allowed in here?" Bryce snarled, staring at Lucas. His arm still ached where Lucas had broken it. In fact, Bryce had probably lost more than anyone else because of Lucas. He was also right at the top of the list of people who hated Lucas's guts. Of course, he wasn't a complete idiot. Just as Bryce stood up, ready to go cause some trouble for Lucas, he suddenly realized someone had already beaten him to it and sat down right beside him.
Mr. Gray, I didn't expect you to be invited too. I figured someone with your status wouldn't have to show up to these things,
Aston Brooks said with a smooth smile as he sat down next to Lucas. Lucas just nodded and leaned back in his chair. "I'm surprised someone from out of town like you got an invitation from the Hales. Looks like you're pretty tight with them, huh?" Aston smiled.
Not at all. Actually, thanks to you, the Brooks are just starting to get a solid footing here in Orange County. The Hales are one of the top 4 families in Orange County, so of course we need to build a good relationship with them. I won't lie, I've actually gotten pretty close with Connor Hale recently.
Aston was trying to sound humble, but he was really just flexing his social connections, trying to show off the Brooks' influence to Lucas. He was basically sending a message. Now that they were in with the Hales, it wouldn't be so easy for Lucas to get people in Orange County to shut them out. Even though the Brooks had pretended to be on Lucas's side before, they actually couldn't stand him. They thought Lucas was nuts for trying to go up against the Huttons instead of just using his family name to his advantage. Of course, Aston kept a straight face and was still polite and respectful to Lucas. Too bad for him, he wasn't a very good actor, and Lucas had seen right through the Brooks' little game for a while now. Lucas looked at Aston with a strange expression.
He wondered what Aston would do if he knew why Lucas was really at the Hales banquet tonight. Would he still be sitting there so proudly, bragging about his friendship with the Hales? Aston would probably be kicking himself and wishing he could pretend he didn't even know Lucas. If you don't want to regret this later, you should probably keep your distance. Don't say I didn't warn you, Lucas said casually. What? Aston frowned, totally missing what Lucas was getting at. Just then, Bryce walked over. He shot Lucas a nasty look before forcing a smile at Aston. Mr. Brooke, how have you been? My cousin, she's young and doesn't know any better. She ended up causing you some trouble, and I want to apologize on her behalf. Whether things work out with Scarlett or not, we can still have a great working relationship, right? Bryce raised his wine glass, toasting Aston as a way to make up for Scarlett's screw-ups. Aston frowned. A while back, he had come to Orange County looking for a business partner. The Carters had been super eager, reaching out to him multiple times. They even gave up a lot in the contract negotiations. At the time, the Brooks were having trouble finding anyone willing to work with them, so Aston decided to give the Carters a shot. After that, Dominic even had his granddaughter, Scarlett, show Aston around Orange County. But Aston saw right through their little scheme. Of course, he didn't exactly turn her down. Scarlett was making it pretty clear she was interested, and he wasn't one to pass up an opportunity. But that clueless girl, Scarlett, actually thought she was going to marry him. She even picked a fight with Lucas a few times, almost dragging Aston into it. So, naturally, he dropped a woman he deemed foolish and without connections, like a hot potato. After that, Scarlett cried, threw fits, and called him non-stop. Aston had to block her number and every other way she could contact him. He refused to see her. Only then did he finally get some peace and quiet. So, when Bryce walked up and brought up Scarlett again, Aston got super annoyed. The Brooks weren't being boycotted anymore. Ever since they basically swore loyalty to Lucas, he'd backed off. That meant the Brooks could now easily find great business partners in Orange County, and it was looking very likely they'd be working with the Hales. So, naturally, Aston didn't really care about the Carters anymore. On top of that, Aston had asked around and heard about the beef between the Carters and Lucas. He knew that Bryce, who he couldn't stand anyway, had been pushing Lucas's buttons over and over. Seeing Bryce lean in to offer a toast, Aston just snorted and didn't move. Completely embarrassed, Bryce just stood there, frozen. Luckily, the guy had a thick skin, so he just smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll drink to that." Then he chugged the entire glass of wine and showed the empty glass to Aston, acting like Aston had actually joined him. After watching Bryce's little one-man show, Aston said with total disgust, "It's amazing how some people have no shame. You're not welcome here. If I were you, I would have been gone a long time ago." Aston's voice was pretty loud, so people nearby started looking over. When Bryce saw all the eyes on him, his face went stiff and started burning. Aston had totally humiliated him. But then Bryce saw Lucas sitting next to Aston, and an idea popped into his head. He figured Aston couldn't possibly be talking about him. He had to be talking about that good-for-nothing Lucas. Realizing this, Bryce instantly felt way better. He pointed right at Lucas. "Lucas Gray, you hear that? You're just a loser the Carters kicked to the curb. And you've got the nerve to just waltz in here to the Hales banquet? Mr. Brooke is right. You have no shame. What are you still doing here? Get lost." Bryce's voice was loud, and it drew the attention of all the guests at their table. A lot of them started whispering to each other. "That young guy who just yelled. He's a Carter, right?" a guest asked. "Yeah, that's Dominic Carter's only grandson," another replied. "I heard he's supposed to take over the family business someday. The guy he's yelling at, the one sitting down, is supposedly some live-in son-in-law. And you can tell. Look how cheap his clothes are." A guest laughed. "I've heard that story too. The guy's a total deadbeat. He vanished for like 6 years and just showed up again not long ago. Then he did something to really tick off Dominic Carter, who kicked him, his wife, and her whole family out of the Carter family." "Sounds like he's bad news," someone added. "I heard he's the same guy who was mixed up in that scandal with Cheyenne Carter way back when, right?" "Yep, that's him. I can't believe he'd have the guts to show his face at the Hales banquet. The guy has absolutely no shame." Instead of answering, Lucas just scoffed at Bryce's words and the whispers spreading around them. Meanwhile, Aston's expression soured. He had thrown that insult at Bryce, but the fool twisted it and aimed it at Lucas instead. Now there was no easy way to explain the situation.
Of course, Aston was just putting on a sour face. He had no intention of calling Bryce out directly. Why not let this idiot Bryce Carter pick a fight with Lucas Gray while he just watched from the sidelines? Even if Lucas decided to come after him for it, Aston could easily dodge the blame. Besides, he was technically yelling at Bryce, not Lucas. Lucas's smirk made Bryce feel like he was being looked down on, which only made him angrier. He pointed a finger at Lucas and snapped, "The Hale residence isn't a place for your kind. You need an invitation to be here. How could a loser like you get an invite from the Hales? You must have snuck in or faked one." Lucas just smiled calmly. "So, based on what you're saying, the Hales must be pretty incompetent. If I snuck in, it just proves their security is a joke. And if I faked an invitation, it means the people checking them at the door are completely incompetent, right? Since when did I say anything bad about the Hales? Don't talk nonsense." Bryce panicked, waving his hands around as he tried to explain. "I meant a loser like you must have used some shady way to get in here. I never meant to criticize the Hales." Lucas held up his hands. "So you're saying the Hales staff is so bad that even a loser like me can just waltz right in?" Bryce was sweating, totally panicking because he couldn't talk his way out of it. He was terrified the Hales would get the wrong idea, so he just yelled at Lucas, "Shut up! Stop trying to stir up trouble." Noticing the argument, the Hales, who obviously didn't want a scene at their own party, sent over a couple of family members who were managing the event, along with some security guards. "Everyone, today is the Hales' baby shower," a middle-aged man said firmly. "Even if you have a disagreement, please handle it later. Do us a favor and don't cause a scene here." When Bryce saw the Hales people, he immediately pointed at Lucas, acting all offended. "Hello, sir. I'm with the Carter Corporation. This guy here is Lucas Gray, a good-for-nothing son-in-law our family kicked to the curb. I bet he doesn't have an invitation from the Hales and just snuck in. You need to check him." The middle-aged man frowned. The Hales had invited a lot of high society elites to their baby shower today, so security was obviously very tight. He didn't really believe someone could have just snuck in. Lucas, in his plain, simple clothes, was someone he didn't recognize. But if he really was the loser son-in-law the Carters kicked out, like Bryce claimed,
then he definitely wouldn't have been on the Hales guest list. That made his presence here very suspicious. The man looked at Lucas and said in a polite but firm tone, "Excuse me, sir, can I please see your invitation?" Lucas narrowed his eyes. Why? Do the Hales also doubt their own staff's competence? Do you also think I snuck in? The man looked at Lucas's calm and collected expression and got the feeling he hadn't snuck in. He started to wonder. But today's baby shower was a huge deal for the Hales, and the guests were mostly high-status families from Orange County. If someone really did get in and cause trouble, he'd be the one to answer for it. Thinking about that, the man softened his tone, but he was still insistent. "We have a lot of guests today. For everyone's safety, please just cooperate with us. The Hales will make it right with you afterward." The commotion in the banquet hall quickly caught everyone's attention. Hearing that someone might have crashed the party, almost all the guests got curious. They looked over to see who was bold enough to cause a scene at the Hales' baby shower. Bryce was sure that Lucas didn't have an invitation, but when he saw how calm Lucas was, even casually sipping his tea without a hint of fear, Bryce started to get nervous. Could that loser really have an invitation? No, that's impossible. How could a nobody like him get an invitation from the Hales, one of the most powerful families in the city? Bryce desperately tried to reassure himself as he watched Lucas.
The members of the Hale family and all the other guests were staring at Lucas, waiting to see if he would produce an invitation. For a moment, he was the center of attention in the entire banquet hall. Lucas just smirked, then pulled out a beautifully engraved invitation card and slapped it on the table. "Since you want to see it so badly, take a good look." When they saw he actually had an invitation, the expressions on people's faces changed. Some even looked disappointed. Bryce's heart pounded in his chest. That loser actually had an invitation. Why? More importantly, since Lucas had one of the Hales' invitations, it meant he was an honored guest, and Bryce's accusation was a lie. Since Bryce had caused the Hales to embarrass a guest, they would definitely blame him. His face went pale as a ghost. Bryce pointed at the invitation and insisted, "His invitation has to be fake. You need to check it carefully." The middle-aged man picked up the gold-embossed invitation card and opened it. The Hales had a tradition of not putting names on their invitations, so anyone holding one was welcome. However, it wasn't easy to forge an invitation from the Hale family. In the center of every real invitation was a small eagle seal that was hard to spot and even harder to copy. And right in the middle of the invitation Lucas had produced, there it was, a small, perfect eagle seal. This meant the invitation was real.
Thanks.
The middle-aged man held out the invitation, handing it back to Lucas. He bowed his head slightly. "My apologies, Mr. Gray. This invitation is authentic. I am so sorry for the misunderstanding just now. I didn't mean to offend you. Please, forgive me." Then he straightened up and shot Bryce an ice-cold glare. It was all Bryce's fault for pushing him to demand Lucas show his invitation. He was just a steward for the Hales, and if he offended an honored guest, he'd be in serious trouble. Bryce's mouth fell open. He stumbled back a couple of steps. How can that be real? How could he actually have an invitation from the Hales? No, that's impossible. He must have stolen it from someone. A sharp, hard slap across Bryce's face cut off his rambling.
Dominic had walked over at some point. After slapping Bryce to shut him up, he turned to the steward and the other guests with an apologetic expression. "Sorry, everyone," he said. "My grandson, Bryce, got a little carried away and made a mistake. We're very sorry for the disturbance." Lucas slowly sipped his tea and casually tossed the invitation back onto the table. The truth was, the invitation wasn't his. Jordan had taken it from Seth Miller, the guy who had been causing a scene with them earlier. Flynn Davis actually had a few extra invitations, but he hadn't given one to Lucas because Lucas had already said he couldn't make it to the baby shower. After hearing what Dominic said, the people around them immediately started whispering to each other. It was obvious to everyone that Bryce wasn't just carried away. He clearly had a grudge against Lucas and was trying to bully him. Thinking about how Lucas used to be the Carters' live-in son-in-law before he, his wife, and her family were all kicked out, they figured there had to be a juicy story there. Almost everyone there was from a prominent family in Orange County, and every wealthy family had skeletons in their closets. For a moment, people's minds raced with all sorts of theories. A few of the younger guys who knew Bryce started smirking. "Hey, Mr. Carter, that's not the guy who was in that scandal with your cousin Cheyenne Carter, is it?" The sneering way they said "scandal" fired Bryce right up. He felt like he'd found an ally. "That's him, the broke loser. After he caused that whole mess, we had no choice but to make Cheyenne marry him to save the family's reputation. We let him mooch off of us, paid for everything. And this is the thanks we get? The guy doesn't even know the meaning of gratitude." Bryce said this loudly on purpose, glancing at Lucas with contempt, as if Lucas owed the Carters big time. "Oh? How is he ungrateful?" someone asked, their curiosity piqued. "Not long after he got married, he took off with hundreds of thousands of dollars from his father-in-law and didn't come back for 6 years. After blowing all that cash, he had the nerve to show up again and expect us to take care of him? And that's not even the half of it. He's incredibly arrogant and a real piece of work. He talked back to my grandfather so many times, it made the old man pass out. He even had the guts to hit me just because he was in the army for a few years. Look, this ungrateful jerk is the one who broke my wrist." Bryce held up his wrist, still wrapped in gauze, and showed it to the people around him as proof of what Lucas had done. "Unfortunately, my cousin, Cheyenne Carter, was somehow wrapped around his little finger. She insisted on siding with this lowlife just to tick us off. In the end, we had no choice but to kick them out of the family and cut them off completely. We just couldn't take it anymore." Bryce twisted the truth, painting the Carters as innocent victims. He labeled Lucas and Cheyenne as ungrateful, heartless people who had no respect for their family. After saying his piece, Bryce felt a wave of satisfaction, like he'd finally let out all his frustration. He felt like he was on top again, better than Lucas. A sharp cracking sound suddenly cut through the air, stopping Bryce mid-sentence. Lucas had crushed the teacup in his hand, and the broken pieces clattered onto the table. Everyone immediately fell silent, staring at him in shock. In the dead silence, he spoke. "That's a lie, and now you're insulting my wife. It seems you forgot the warning I gave you." Lucas's gaze was ice cold. His eyes had a sharp glint as he stared daggers at Bryce, his presence so intense it felt like it could crush a person. The air around Lucas seemed to turn to ice, and many people instinctively took a few steps back, a shiver running down their spines. Facing Lucas's intimidating glare, Bryce was completely overwhelmed with fear. It felt like Lucas's eyes were daggers piercing his heart, making his body tremble as he broke out in a cold sweat.
His legs felt like jelly.
Leaning on a nearby chair for support, Bryce stammered. "I'm not lying. The scandal with you and Cheyenne Carter was real. Are you going to deny you had anything to do with what's been happening to the Carters lately?" Lucas stared coldly at Bryce. "Since you brought up the past, how about you remember the whole story? That scandal only happened because you and the rest of the Carters set Cheyenne up, just so you could take over the Brilliance Corporation." Lucas's words left everyone stunned. Pretty much everyone in Orange County had heard about the scandal involving Cheyenne and Lucas, who was just a driver back then. The story going around was that Cheyenne, who seemed so poised and proper on the outside, had a secret, unseemly side and had become involved with a simple driver. Her reputation was ruined overnight. So when the Carters took the Brilliance Corporation from her, a company she had built from the ground up, most people thought she got what she deserved. They even figured the Carters did the right thing, thinking she would only bring more shame to the family if she stayed on as the head of the company. But now, they were hearing something shocking. It turned out the Carters had orchestrated the whole scandal just to steal the Brilliance Corporation from Cheyenne. The revelation was unbelievable. The looks on Bryce and Dominic's faces changed completely. They never imagined this punk would find out about something they had kept so secret, something only a handful of people knew. But no matter how Lucas found out, there was no way they could admit they were behind it all. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be the two of them. The entire Carter family would be completely humiliated. Their business, which they had worked so hard to turn around, would take another nosedive. Who would want to partner with a company that has no morals and would do anything for a profit? Bryce and Dominic exchanged a look, both knowing exactly what the other was thinking. Feeling Dominic's support, Bryce got bolder and yelled, "That's a load of crap! The Carters have never done anything like that. You're just trying to trash our reputation, you good-for-nothing loser!" As he spoke, he grabbed a bottle of white wine and swung it hard at Lucas's head. A sharp crack echoed as the glass bottle shattered against someone's head. The thick glass shattered on impact, and a mixture of fragrant white wine and blood began to stream down his face. The people around them let out a collective gasp, staring in disbelief at the scene unfolding before them. What they couldn't believe was that Bryce had been the one to grab the wine bottle, intending to smash it over Lucas's head. But now, the one bleeding from a head wound was Bryce himself, not Lucas. No one in the room saw how Lucas had snatched the bottle from Bryce's hand and smashed it over his head in the blink of an eye. Stunned, Bryce just stood there for a moment before clutching his head and screaming in pain. Lucas casually tossed the broken neck of the bottle to the floor. He picked up a stack of crisp white napkins from the table and slowly wiped the spilled wine from his hands. No one dared to say a word. Only after Lucas had cleaned his hands did he glance at Bryce, whose face was now streaked with blood. "You got so angry and embarrassed when I exposed the truth that you tried to kill me?" he scoffed. "You're not even in my league." Lucas's voice was calm and collected, but to Bryce, it was absolutely terrifying. The comment instantly brought back memories of the humiliating beatdowns he'd suffered every other time he'd tried to mess with Lucas. "Bryce, are you okay?" Dominic yelled, rushing over. He grabbed a clean napkin and pressed it to the bleeding wound on Bryce's head, trying to stop the bleeding. At the same time, Dominic shot Lucas a hateful look. He wanted to scream at him for being so vicious, But he froze when he met Lucas's icy gaze. He'd seen just how vicious and ruthless Lucas could be. Not long ago, Lucas had stormed into the Carter residence and nearly strangled him. Lucas wouldn't hesitate to hurt him just because he was an older man. He and Bryce were nothing to Lucas. Yelling at Lucas would be pointless. It would probably just make him angrier and get him beaten up too. Thinking of this, Dominic had no choice but to swallow his anger and keep his mouth shut. Sitting nearby, Aston sucked in a sharp breath. The lightning-fast, emotionless way Lucas had struck Bryce was horrifying. Aston could also tell Lucas had held back. Otherwise, Bryce would be dealing with a lot more than just a serious head wound. On top of that, Aston sensed something was off about Lucas's methods. This wasn't how a guest at a banquet was supposed to act. In fact, his behavior was incredibly disrespectful to the Hales. Lucas had just told him to stay away tonight if he didn't want to regret it. At the time, Aston wasn't sure what he meant. He just figured Lucas was some nobody looking to start trouble, just like Bryce. But now, Aston understood exactly what Lucas meant. It seemed Lucas had come to the baby shower today with a score to settle. He was certain Lucas was here to cause a scene. After a long, stunned silence, the people around them couldn't help but start whispering to each other. Wow, they were just calling him a worthless freeloader, but the guy's got some serious moves and quick reflexes. He didn't even hesitate before taking down that loser from the Carter family. He's definitely not as simple as he looks. Yeah, but Bryce Carter tried to smash the bottle on him first. Lucas just snatched it away and hit him back. Now it's hard to say who's really in the wrong. Man, judging by the look on Bryce Carter's face, I'm starting to think what Lucas Gray said might be true. Maybe the Carters really did set Cheyenne Carter up to steal her company. That's just cold-blooded. They're family. How could they be so cruel? Look, families like ours might not be squeaky clean, but pulling a stunt like that to frame your own family is next level. No wonder the Carters are going downhill. Now that the Brilliance Corporation is gone, their reputation is in the toilet. I heard they almost went bankrupt a while back. These comments made Bryce and Dominic so furious they could spit nails. Who would have thought that the secret they'd buried for so many years would be dragged out into the open by Lucas today? On top of that, Bryce trying to smash a wine bottle over Lucas's head just made it look like he flew off the handle because he was embarrassed and trying to shut him up. Now the Carters' reputation was completely trashed. But while people were whispering and gossiping about Cheyenne and the Carters, plenty of others thought Lucas's behavior was way out of line.
No matter what, this is the Hales' baby shower. Smashing a bottle over Bryce Carter's head and drawing blood like that? That's seriously bad luck.
I wonder how the Hales are going to handle this. If it were my party, I wouldn't let anyone who dared to cause trouble get away with it. People were murmuring, but they kept their voices down and didn't dare to look Lucas in the eye. 2 guests had gotten into a fight and drawn blood at the party. Seeing the mess, the head of staff was frustrated. He had already sent someone to report it to his superiors. Soon, a man in his 30s, wearing a tailored suit and gold-rimmed glasses, walked over with a powerful stride. He had the look of a top-tier executive, but his brow was furrowed in a deep frown. Anyone would be upset to find out someone had started a fight and caused something as unlucky as bloodshed at their celebration. The moment this man appeared, everyone around him lit up, smiling eagerly as they greeted him. A guest said, "Mr. Hale, you're here." Another guest added, "Mr. Hale, congratulations." This was Connor Hale, Logan Hale's brother, the 3rd-generation heir to the Hale family fortune. Rumor had it that Connor had studied abroad for several years, majoring in business management. He was incredibly sharp, and despite his young age, he was already being groomed to be the next head of the Hale family. Because of this, no one who knew of him would dare to underestimate him. The baby shower was for Connor's newborn son. Now that the host had come to handle the situation himself, everyone turned to look at Lucas, their faces full of smug satisfaction.
Connor walked over, frowning. He'd already gotten the rundown on his way over. As soon as he arrived, he saw Bryce pressing a white napkin to his bleeding head. He then looked at Lucas, looking completely calm, sitting in a chair and sipping his tea. Staring at the two of them, especially the unharmed Lucas, Connor narrowed his eyes, his voice sharp.
Today is my son's baby shower, and I trust all our guests are here to wish him well and celebrate with us. The Hales made it clear to everyone beforehand. Whatever beef you have with each other, you leave it at the door. You don't cause trouble on our property. If you have to settle something, you do it after you've left our home.
Connor glared at Lucas.
You get that?
As the next in line to lead the Hales, Connor was incredibly arrogant. He acted like just saying those words was more than enough courtesy for a nobody like Lucas. Lucas looked up at Connor. He sighed softly and asked calmly, "Is Logan Hale your younger brother?" Connor raised his eyebrows and answered like it was obvious.
Of course, everyone knows he's my younger brother. If you're about to tell me you're a friend of Logan's, you can save your breath. He's got shady friends all over the county. Even if you do know him, you're just another one of them. Hearing this, Lucas gave a smile that looked dangerous to Connor. He said softly, "Since you admit he's your younger brother, that makes things a lot easier." Connor immediately frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Sitting calmly in his chair, Lucas said nonchalantly, "The Hales owe me an explanation, and I'll be getting it from you." Connor snorted with laughter like he'd just heard the funniest joke in the world. He finally realized Lucas wasn't trying to use Logan's name to get friendly. He was here to demand an explanation. He figured Logan must have done something to provoke this guy, and now he was here looking for payback. The whole thing was just ridiculous. The Hales were one of the 4 most powerful families in Orange County, and his younger brother, Logan, had been spoiled rotten his whole life. He was always causing trouble and bullying people, but because of the Hales' power and influence, nobody ever dared to fight back. Hardly anyone was as bold as Lucas, showing up at their home to demand an explanation. Connor laughed dismissively and shook his head. "No matter what kind of beef you have with my brother, you're in no position to demand an explanation from us." At this moment, the people around them started whispering to each other, thinking Lucas was getting way ahead of himself. They all thought he was just some worthless son-in-law with a death wish, making a scene at the Hales' home. Lucas looked up, gave Connor a calm glance, and asked, "Is that right?" The moment he finished speaking, he shot up from his seat, reached out, and grabbed a fistful of Connor's hair. Before a horrified and dumbfounded Connor could even react, Lucas plunged his face into a large ceramic bowl of lobster bisque. "Ugh!" A muffled cry of shock and pain escaped him as the hot soup met his skin. He began to struggle, arms flailing as he thrashed against Lucas's hold, knocking plates and bowls from the table to shatter on the floor. "How dare you!" "Let go of Mr. Hale, right now!" The Hales around them finally snapped out of their shock, reacting to what was happening as Connor struggled for air. They immediately yelled at Lucas and reached out to grab him, trying to rescue Connor, whose head was still being held in the soup bowl. If this continued, Connor might become the first heir in Orange County to meet his end in a bowl of soup. Luckily, Lucas didn't actually want to kill Connor, so he yanked his head out of the soup by his hair. He then shoved him toward the Hales, who were rushing over. "Mr. Hale! Mr. Hale, are you okay?" The Hales rushed to catch Connor, frantically grabbing clean napkins to wipe his head and face, which were drenched in bisque and covered with bits of food. In the chaos, no one paid any attention to Lucas. Lucas casually sat back down in his seat and asked with a smile, "So, do I have the right to hold a grudge against the Hales now?" Everyone else was just stunned, watching the whole thing unfold. They stared at Lucas in total shock and disbelief. They couldn't believe he had the guts to shove Connor's head into a soup bowl right in front of everyone, at a party hosted by the Hales, no less. Meanwhile, Aston, who was standing right next to Lucas, gasped. Even though he'd guessed Lucas had bad intentions for showing up at the baby shower, he never expected him to be so ruthless and do something like that to Connor. This was basically a declaration of war on the Hales, a huge insult to Connor and his entire family. By now, with the help of his family, Connor had managed to wipe most of the soup from his face and head, but his hair was still slick with soup, his face flushed and raw from the heat, and his expensive custom-made suit was ruined by the stains. He was an absolute mess. Connor's bloodshot eyes shot open, and he glared at Lucas with pure, menacing rage. "No one has ever dared to treat me like this. I'm going to kill you." Connor had grown up as the center of attention, showered with praise and respect his whole life, whether in Orange County or overseas. Now that he was the designated heir to the Hale family fortune, his future was set. And yet, here he was, getting his head shoved into a bowl of soup by a complete nobody. He was dead set on killing Lucas, who, in his eyes, was nothing more than a worthless loser. The handful of Hales and their bodyguards immediately stepped forward, surrounding Lucas. Faced with Connor's raw fury, the onlookers fell silent. They kept their heads down, afraid to make a sound, terrified they might set him off and get dragged into it. But Lucas, the direct target of Connor's anger, wasn't scared at all. In fact, he just smirked, a look of pure contempt on his face. The tension was thick, but then an older man with graying hair rushed over. He leaned in and whispered something in Connor's ear. Connor's face tightened into a frown. He shot Lucas a vicious glare. "I'll let this slide for now," he snarled, "but you're gonna pay for this later." With that, Connor turned and led the other Hales away.